If you've been past St Edward's Church in Leek, then there's a good chance that you've been past the oldest house in Leek, but you might not have noticed. This row of cottages is number 2 to 4 Clerk Bank, but it's just this little one that we're talking about today, and this is number 2. This row of cottages was originally just one cottage, and it was built out of wood and wattle and daub, and we think it was built around 1460. We know that Leek is a very old village, and the history extends back to prehistoric times, and there's even been a market in Leek since King John gave them a market charter in 1207. But other than the church, which is 13th century, there isn't really much surviving from that time in Leek. And we're lucky that these buildings survive because we get to see a crook-framed building in all its glory. And this is a crook, so the crook is basically the wooden framing that the building is made out of. And then inside that is the wattle and daub, which is basically twigs and mud and, cow poo and things like that. And then it would have been finished with a thatch roof over the top. And this would have been quite a large cottage in its time, because the 3 cottages that are there now were originally 2 cottages, and this one would have been a workshop. And after the building was split, there's been quite a few different people that have lived here over the years, and the building's had a few different uses. The earliest record that I can find of someone living here is in the 1841 census. George Calley lived here with his family, and he's listed as a baker, which might explain the chutes that are in this basement. So this side of the house has 2 stories, but it also has a small undercroft, and you might notice the curved roof on the top. It's quite typical of these undercrofts that are all around Leek. These are under quite a lot of the shops. But what makes this different is that it's got 2 different types of chutes, and I think one's for coal and one was for flour. The 3 cottages, though, when they were combined, have an interesting history, because in 1859, the cottages served as the first premises for the Leek and Moorlands Cooperative Society. The society was initially formed by 12 men who became the first shareholders, each contributing £1, some by putting in £1 a week until they reached the total. They then set about decorating and furnishing this little shop with the help of their wives, and stocked it with goods for sale, and therefore it became the first co-op. But it wasn't long until they outgrew the shop, and they moved across the road. Now we know that the house was split by 1881, because on the census is an Isaac Clowes who was a bootmaker, and he lived there with his children and a boarder named Sarah who worked as a silk picker. But by 1881 the house is listed as number 2 Clerk Bank. In 1911 the cottage at number 2 was home to John Charles Maguire, and he was a lithographer printer from Dublin, and he lived there with his family. I also found a really interesting article from the Leek Post and Times from 1939, because during World War II, Leek was a brilliant place for evacuees, and a boy named Dennis Gaskin was evacuated to number 2 Clerk Bank, and he experienced rural life, possibly for the first time. And there's an article that talks about going blackberry picking and apple picking and how happy he was, and his other brothers were in Leek as well. If you want to have a look at this, I have put it on the article that I've written on my website, which is the Red Haired Stokey, which does go a little bit more in depth. Now it has also been mentioned that this building was a pub called the Horse and Jockey, but I can't find any historical records to verify this. The only thing that I can find is a couple of mentions of it in books in the library, but they don't give any sources. So it might have been, but I can't find any proof. There are a few other significant timber frame buildings in Leek, but none as old as this. So there's numbers 2 and 4 Church Street, which is at the top of the marketplace, which incorporates the remains of a 16th century timber framed building. And then you've got the Black Swan Inn in Sheep Market, which is also a crook-framed building. You've also got the Hall House, which is now the Red Lion Inn, and that was built in 1607, and that's one of the largest timber frame buildings in Leek. But as far as I can tell, this is definitely the oldest house, if not the oldest building that survives in Leek today, other than St Edward's Church. And the fantastic thing about this beautiful little house is, it's now an Airbnb, so you can actually come and stay here in the centre of Leek and go out hiking, enjoy the market, go for a walk, go shopping, and get to enjoy this fantastic little time capsule of history. I mean, this isn't just an Airbnb, this is the oldest building in Leek, and you get to come and stay here. Now, you all know that I'm a huge advocate for reusing and repurposing our heritage buildings, but this was built as a cottage, and it's staying as a cottage, but now it's sustainable, and I love that. Outside the cottage is just as beautiful. Just behind Clerk Bank is Naylor Yard, and this was a centre of industry at its time. There was mineral water that was produced by William Haywood in a factory there, and the yard itself was named after the nailers who worked there. And by 1835 there was actually a man called John Smith who was making nails there. But today, Naylor Yard and all of these lovely little cobbled alleyways around the back are full of beautiful, beautiful homes. And the history of the area is being kept alive. It's such a beautiful little place to walk around. Clerk Bank was in disrepair, however it's been meticulously restored, and they've uncovered a lot of the features like the wattle and daub and the wooden beams, and kept all of them original features for you to enjoy. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to check out my other local history videos and my website, which is The Red Haired Stokey.